At present, the UK government is considering withdrawing from the ECHR, and we are here to protest. We believe that this would be a backward step, a corrosion of our rights. We protest in song. Join us.
We are the great-grandchildren of David Maxwell Fyfe. We're here in Dornoch, we're here in Edinburgh, we're here in Liverpool, we're here in London because it's the source of his mythical stream of natural law, which carried him through post-war Europe and inspired him with others to create the European Convention on Human Rights, to protect Europe from tyranny and to sow seeds of freedom.
There is mystery in human rights. We knew that Dornoch in early January would be quiet, but it was important for us to begin our protest where David Maxwell Fyfe's inspiration was drawn. So why David Maxwell Fyfe?
Firstly, David Maxwell Fyfe is our great-grandfather, and we have discovered his story through our family history. He was a British prosecutor at the Nuremberg war crimes trials, who went on to champion and draft the European Convention on Human Rights. He said he saw himself as an actor with a small walking-on role in a mighty drama, and his experience of these two events after World War II give us a personal insight into how they came to be. Another thing he said was, you cannot see the present except in the light of the past. And he is the guide to our past as we tell his story.
There is mystery in human rights, and for him, the mystery stemmed from the law of nature that he first discerned in Dornoch and its surrounds.
I have always been a romantic, and for me, the past is people with brave and generous spirits.
I dreamed I saw the healthy hand of ancient history, accepted a precious stone, set in a summer sea, possessed by giants and knights so bold, an epic treasury, so fair this golden land, so free.
So why music and pictures?
As you can see around us, we have a beautiful landscape. This inspired Maxwell Fyfe. He used to have holidays here. He was inspired by poetry, many from James Logie Robertson, and then latterly Rupert Brooke. He put it in his speeches. He wrote about it extensively in his autobiography. And this melded our story and inspired the way we wanted to tell it.
This was the source of the stream that carried him to exact natural justice at Nuremberg and champion the European Convention on Human Rights. Dornoch is the birthplace of that story. There is reason in human rights. We are returning to Edinburgh as the birthplace and childhood home of David Maxwell Fyfe. It was here that he discerned the reason of the Scottish Enlightenment that is the foundation of modern human rights. So, has natural law got anything to do with nature?
Maxwell Fyfe was born and brought up here in Edinburgh. He was educated at Oxford University, where he learned a lot about the classics. Many philosophers will often talk about the idea of natural law. Natural law stems from the idea of nature, what we consider to be right and wrong. It's rather complicated nowadays to be able to know exactly what is right and wrong, but it is an ideal that we should all focus on, a foundation in our society that we can look to be able to create our laws.
I
just think when we're telling a story, if we can enliven it in different ways, give it colour, rather than just create another report which sits on a shelf somewhere. What you're doing is standing up and being a human voice and coming together in harmony and doing it in a creative, engaging way, which is undeniable. It's engaging and beautiful, and so other human beings have to take notice.
So fair this golden land, so free.
Do we have a crisis in the ecology of human nature?
The world at the moment has many crises, including climate change and the crisis in the natural world. As creatures of nature, we experience changes too, season to season. These changes need to be reflected in the way the law is made and put to work. As Maxwell Fyfe said, the law is a living thing, and it must grow and change to meet the changing needs of society. His inspiration came from nature, and his imagination was fired by the novels of Walter Scott and other writers to build a better world after World War II. The antidote to crisis is inspiration, and his story shows how when people work together, we can build a better world.
Without a universal understanding and respect for all humans, the world becomes disrupted and unreasonable.
I know that my faith receives many pitying smiles from the cynic and the intellectual, yet I know of no other that can help me in what I believe to be my most important task, namely to try to secure that in the second half of our mad century, the spiritual stature of mankind will approximate to material and scientific advances.
All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. All shall be well, and all shall be well, manner of things shall be well, all manner of things shall be well.
It was in Edinburgh that he nurtured the romantic vigour that carried him to Nuremberg, where he prosecuted leading Nazis, and to Strasbourg to champion the European Convention on Human Rights. There is justice in human rights. Throughout his time in Nuremberg, David was MP for the West Derby constituency in Liverpool, and he had honed his skills as a barrister on the Northern Circuit in that city, with chambers on Lord Street. Sylvia was a child of Liverpool, and while David was in Nuremberg, she took on his responsibilities of constituency MP. It is this bond that led us to first perform on Holocaust Memorial Day in the museums of Liverpool. This is a very important time of year. On 27th of January 1945, the Russian army reached the Auschwitz concentration camp and liberated the remaining prisoners. Over the past 10 years, we've been honoured to play a small part in these memorials. We've been drawn in because of the story we tell. At Nuremberg, he was one of the first to forensically study the evidence of Holocaust, including the Russian film showing the liberation of Auschwitz and capturing the evidence of the barbaric atrocities of the Nazis. So what does tyranny look like?
Tyranny has been a feature of life throughout the ages, from King John and the barons who enshrined natural law in Magna Carta, to later years in the Nazi regime in Germany. Tyranny seeks to undermine the freedom of all people. and restrict their way of life. When Sylvia visited Nuremberg and returned, she wrote to her husband David, "It seems most necessary to get some anti-Nazi propaganda about. Everyone seems to have forgotten, and coming fresh from its surroundings as I have done, I cannot believe people can forget so fast. We must never look the other way again." In the spirit of Sylvia, we must never look the other way again when it comes to remembering the lessons of the past and how they affect the way we live our lives today.
It is just as well that in respect of the Nazi war crimes, the apologists of the future will be confronted by the admissions of the many found guilty and the mass of incriminating documents produced at the trials.
Dawn was theirs, and the sunset, and the colors of the earth. They had seen much of music, till on earth lost its worth. No slumber and waking, love had once befriended. Santa all this is ended.
Except that now we are turning to look the other way again. So why the ECHR?
It is a question often asked by politicians today. Why do we need a convention to tell us about the idea of our human rights? The Human Rights Act and anything that has followed the Good Friday Agreement have all come from this idea of a convention, bringing together many countries inside of the Council of Europe. David Maxwell Fyfe believed that the law is a living thing, that it needs to change with society. And one of the things that has often happened throughout history is that laws do change and they need to be changed. But it needed to be a seed and it needed to be grown. Otherwise, nothing can grow and nothing can change. So that's why we need to continue to have something like the ECHR for it to grow and to change.
There were waters flow, stormy waters, blown by changing winds to laughter, and lit by the rich skies all day.
On Holocaust Memorial Day, the dehumanising of those in terror must end, and we must turn again to democracy and the rule of law. There is thought in human rights. Academic institutions create streams of thought. Generations grow to think alike. Not all of them, of course, but there are trends. After the Great War, two literary titans of Oxford began their careers reading classics. Both C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien began with the study of the ancient past in Rome and Greece. From their study came a profound understanding of rights and wrongs, of the need for justice, and of a deep and mysterious magic within nature. David Maxwell Fyfe, though a little younger, also studied classics at Oxford around the same time. He already understood the romance and reason of natural law from his education in Edinburgh. But Oxford infused in him, as in his contemporaries, a sense of the form and process necessary to instill hope in the innocent and provoke despair in perpetrators of heinous crimes. So why us?
Our story starts in 1999 with the discovery of David Maxwell Fyfe's papers in the City of London. Among them was a collection of love letters exchanged during the Nuremberg trials between my great-grandparents David and Sylvia. They weave an extraordinary story of how he dealt with the events that took place. We are storytellers, and creatively we've brought his story to life in an exciting and interesting way so people know what the history is. As we've told our story, we've been doing it against a political landscape that has shifted and changed. And therefore, surprisingly, our story has become a story in its own right.
So what's going on?
Well, nothing is certain, but this government has certainly aligned itself with this idea of the revocation of the ECHR. We are the great-grandchildren of David Maxwell Fyfe, and one of the more interesting things about this story is we wanted to know the why, the human side of the decision-making after the post-war era. We believe that the ECHR is a good thing because it protects humanity.
It's sort of in the background and people don't understand it, don't appreciate it, don't feel it affects them. But human rights affects everybody. You never know when you might end up on the wrong side of some bureaucratic court case with some government authority telling you what you can and can't do, and you might need to depend upon it.
There are complex issues still at play in politics, and we're not trying to say that it's a simple solution. What we are saying, however, is that we need countries to work together and to be able to say what we should be doing going forward. That's what we did after the post-war era. Now, some might say that it's not the same, but we need to continue to have a conversation, not have that conversation stopped because of one problem.
There is friction in human rights. As we prepared to protest in London, it was reported that Rishi Sunak is countenancing our withdrawal from the ECHR, based on his failure to manage migration and his dependence on deterrence as the sole tool of government. We protest that this direction of travel is quite wrong and born out of an instinct to further corrode the rights and freedoms of us all and encourage the slide to authoritarianism in direct opposition to the intentions of those who inspired and created the convention.
Rights and concessions, freely, quietly, duly and in peace, fully, entirely, wherefore we will and firmly decree all aforesaid liberties shall be free forever, shall be free.
On the day of our protest, President Zelensky came to address our parliament. Over the last year, we have performed for justice for Ukraine. We signed the declaration calling for the establishment of an ad hoc tribunal to try Russian leaders for the crime of waging aggressive war in the name of David Maxwell Fyfe last March. So what can humanity tolerate? What does humanity stand for?
Humanity stands for the best side of every one of us as human beings.
These ideas don't just go overnight. They are enshrined into our identities. One of the complex part of society nowadays is that we have this idea of justice because of what it suits us, rather than necessarily asking the question, does it suit humanity? Even though the ECHR was based around several issues of how we deal with the decency of our society. Maxwell Fyfe said in one of his speeches the idea of tolerance, decency, and kindliness. It's not impossible to believe that in our society that we should seek and to find those ideals, even when we feel passionately that our rights are being eroded.
David Maxwell Fyfe talked about there being a highest reason of mankind and a best side of human nature. That best side of human nature strives to do the best for every single one of us, whoever we are, wherever we come from as human beings. The importance of this history is to tell the story of how these things came to be and why our humanity is at the heart of how we treat each other.
A pulse in the eternal mind, no less. If somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter and her friends, laughter and her friends, in hearts at peace, and gentleness, hearts at peace, and gentleness, hearts at peace, under an English heaven.
When authoritarianism grows into tyranny and seeks to enslave conquered neighbours to satisfy nationhood, you know that the law of nature is laid to waste, that rights and freedoms are burnt, and that justice must be enacted before peace can be restored. Much better to embrace human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, and grapple with the vast problems of the modern world with the armour which will protect peace and inspire progress.